machen jetzt noch Einzelshots, okay?
Can you look down to your right, please?
Sorry, I missed that.
Okay, to your right. And look over your corner. Look in the corner, please. Hello. In the corner.
Big smile.
To the left, please. To the left.
And then just look at me in the middle, please.
Daniel, to your right. Daniel, look right, please. Look to your right, please. Turn around. Turn around.
Daniel!
Thank you.
Daniel, wave! Andy! Thank you, guys.
So, ladies and gentlemen, please sit down. Please sit down so we can start the press conference. And after this, please, no more photographs, no more flash, just questions and answers. Wenn Sie sich alle gesetzt haben, beginnen wir mit der Pressekonferenz.
Once everyone is
Danach
sitting
bitte
down, we will
keine
start the
Fotos
press
mehr,
conference, after
keine
which I'll ask
Blitzlichter,
you
nur
please to
Fragen und
refrain from
Antworten.
taking any more pictures or using your flash. Just Q&As, please.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this year's press conference of There Will Be Blood Screening and Competition. And have a welcome for Daniel Day-Lewis. The last time he was here, he won the Golden Bear. Let's see what will happen this year. Paul Thomas Anderson, the director. And also have a very welcome to Paul Dano. Paul Thomas, could you tell us, without being in London feeling homesick, this film wouldn't have been here? Is that right?
Yes. The film started with the book by Upton Sinclair, Oil. I started out adapting adapting the book. Well, not really knowing that I was adapting it, but just stealing scenes from it that looked good, and ended up more or less with a lot of original things mixed in with this terrific book that he wrote in 1927. Yeah.
There's a question way in the back. Could you please stand up? Thank you.
My heart is still shaking from the incredible emotions from this film. Thank you very much to all of you. First question is, I would like to know how the actors prepared emotionally and physically before they started playing. And for Mr. Anderson, the title, There Will Be Blood, seems to me, I don't know if I understand this correctly, it seems to me that the main character from the very beginning has been accepting that there would be blood spilled for him to reach his goal. And this acceptance devours him in the end. Is that the purpose of this title?
I like that. I like the way that you said it. Yeah, it works that way. It works hopefully in a few different ways. I like the idea. When we were starting, before we've made the film, Daniel and I thought that we should call it "There Might Be Blood," just in case, just to make sure we did the right thing. And then when we got to the end, we could say, "Okay, now we can call it There Will Be Blood." We didn't. We felt confident enough to call it that in the end, feeling like at its best, the title could be a promise to the audience, and you know. We'll give you what you paid for, hopefully.
So Paul, to the actors.
Well, luckily that's a question I can't answer, so I'll hand it over to Paul Dano.
Well, as much preparation as you do, once you get there, I never feel well prepared enough. So. It was really, on this film, for me, just about sort of unleashing any animal instincts I had for the character. And I think being around Daniel and Paul, who I admire a lot for the risks they take, just sort of encouraged me to really not hold back and try not to look back at what I was doing. And so, you know, physical conditions didn't even come to mind. You know, a lot of people have asked about the physical scenes where they're slapping, and you just don't think twice about that stuff when you're doing it. You just do it. And then before filming, you surround yourself with what you need to try to get to know your guy.
Question in the middle, please. Could you please stand up?
Yes, hi, my name is Sandra. There Will Be Blood is a completely different movie from your previous movies. Why did you change your style and way of directing, first of all? A question for Daniel, what do you expect from American Film Academy? Thank you.
I'll answer that. We expect them to give us all of the awards. Even the ones we weren't nominated for. Hopefully some people will just write in our film. I don't know whether it's a compliment or not. You say that I've changed my style.
I'm going to answer that question. I don't see why Paul should have to answer that. I'm going to answer Paul's question for him. And that's, I think that the stories that Paul has told, the films that he's made, he's found a way of telling that specific story at that specific time. And that's what he did with this. I think principally, I imagine that the work is exactly the same. You find the way to tell that story that for whatever reason you feel a pressing need to tell at that time. And it would have been very strange for him to have felt the need to tell this story and yet tried to tell it in precisely the same way as he tried to tell other stories that had fascinated him previously.
Perfect.
there's a question here in front. Could you please stand up? And please, just one question. There's so much questions here.
Okay, Daniel, in some countries, church has some kind of political authority. Do you consider this right?
I'm not quite sure what that's got to do with my involvement in the film, but which countries are you talking about in particular? And what would you say about the church in Greece, just so I know exactly what you're asking?
With all the fanatical people, and especially in Greece, a lot of people, they are really, the church is really political, and they have a lot of authorities, so I don't know if you think that...
Well, I don't know if you're aware the Archbishop of Canterbury just got himself into deep water this morning. Did any of you see the news? It seems like he's getting it from all sides because he suggested that maybe England should be governed by laws other than those that the political bodies see fit to impose upon their society. And I suppose the separation church and state is something that if you live in a country where that has at some point in your history taken place, it's something you would probably wish to preserve. But it's not really my place to comment on Greek society, I don't think. But I do think the Archbishop of Canterbury made a bit of a mistake there.
A question on the right, could you please stand up? Thanks.
Hello, I'm from Hong Kong TVB Scoop, and this question is for Daniel. I've read in some articles that you've mentioned that in the beginning there was a point where you have to decide whether you're going to film this film. What was the decisions that you were making, and what kind of difficulties that you had in doing this film?
Well, I think the impression I always have, which is more or less the same from one experience to another, is that the decision is made in spite of me. It's an illusion, because of course one could have decided not to get involved, but my impression is always that I feel drawn into the orbit of a world, most often a world that was previously unknown to me, and into the orbit of the life of another man. For the most part, my experience, it's been the lives of others that are utterly mysterious to me. There's a sense of one's own life receding a little bit as one tries to approach this new world and discover it. So I feel somehow as if the decision, of course, Paul and I went through a conventional courtship and flirtation, and without chaperones in our case, but we circled each other for a while. But as far as I was concerned, once I'd read Paul's script, the deal was done. I thought there was no way really to avoid it.
Yes, your question, please.
Hi, my name is Rivina from Hong Kong Cable TV. This question is for Daniel. I've read some articles that you put a lot of effort in discovering the voice for the character. Can you tell us more on that? And what grabs you the most when you first picked up the script? Thank you.
I'd love, I know it's like asking the impossible, but if you could all begin by expunging from your minds anything that you've ever read in any other articles about me. Let's start with a clean slate. I'm happy to try and answer any question, but so much hogwash has been written about the way in which I do my work that I'm less inclined than ever to actually talk about it, because I feel that anything I say just is like throwing petrol on the flames. So, sorry, what was the question?
The voice.
Oh, the voice. Yeah, people have kind of spoken on my behalf again quite a lot about that, and I've tried to resist talking about it because I really don't know how to dismember the life of Plainview into his various component parts, because that's not really the way in which I work. Luckily Paul and I had a long time to get ready for this film because no one would give us any money, and and which was fine, I think, as far as we were concerned at that stage. And during the course of that time, you try and discover a life, just as Paul is trying to imagine a whole world. I, in my own way, in my own work, try to engage with the entire life of a man without dismembering him, because it's quite hard to put people back together again when you dismember them. And so the impression I tend to be left with, if things work, is that little by little something reveals itself which actually you have very little control over whatsoever. So all talk of preparation just seems like daftness. You know, whenever you talk about it, it just seems to make a nonsense of the whole thing. It's just a kind of process of controlled anarchy, really.
Question in the middle, please.
Hello, my name is Mike Jam Television. I have a question for Mr. Anderson. My impression was that most of your main characters are telling stories, which are mostly lies also. At the end, there is a mention of Hollywood. And thirdly, there are some scenes in which you show Mr. Daniel Day-Lewis acting almost like a movie director. In how far is this a personal movie for you?
I think it's incredibly autobiographical. There's very few people that I like. I think Daniel and I talked about it before, and that making a movie can be just like prospecting for silver or drilling for oil, because you know you don't know that if you're going to get anything good, but still you keep going at it, and then maybe once you get one thing that looks pretty good, you get greedy and you keep going at the expense of, you know, for 3 months at the expense of your family, your life, your friends. You just kind of go into another place, and you don't want to come out, and then. Unlike the film, hopefully you come back down to earth, and you get back to some normalcy. But making a film, you can definitely go crazy, but it's a fun crazy. Yeah.
Question, please, here on the left side.
Yes, hello, Stefan Benz, Darmstädter Echo. The score of the film is really remarkable. It's like a voice of its own, or a character of its own. In how far did the concept of this score affect your way of directing, Mr. Anderson, and perhaps the knowledge of the score affect the way of acting in the film to both actors?
Well, you know, the majority of the score was written once we finished shooting, but there were a few pieces that existed before that Johnny Greenwood had done that weren't in the film, but sort of similar instrumentation, and I had them on my mind ever since I was writing, so I had that benefit of knowing more or less what Johnny might come up with. But I never played it for Daniel or Paul. It didn't seem necessary to let them know. Yeah, it just didn't. It wasn't the right thing. But thank you for your compliment about the music.
Your question, please, here in the middle.
Yeah, hello, Nils from Norway here. I got a question for Mr. Anderson. There's now many classic novels being adapted into films, also for the Oscar nominations. Do you think that classic novel has grasped the imagination of the audience more than before? Is that why we see so many epic novels coming up? What is your reason for making a novel into a picture?
Well, I don't know about that trend, but I know that I needed help. I needed a collaborator for this story. It's not, you know, I couldn't have done it on my own, and the book detailed the oil business at the time so well. I mean, there was that the opening speech that Daniel gives in the film is directly from the book, and the introduction of this character who made this promise that he could get lumber for a derrick on such short notice was so exciting when I read that, to meet a character that could get lumber fast. It just seemed like so thrilling. Like in that day and age, that somebody could actually. He said it, and you believed. I believe him. He could get lumber out in the middle of nowhere, which would be hard to do. But it was a terrific book. It was a terrific place to start from, and eventually we took it in our own direction, because it was impossible to take all of the book. It's 500 pages, and it covers the Russian Revolution, it covers Hollywood, it covers Washington, D.C., all these things that would have been impossible to get into a film in a reasonable amount of time. So that's my relationship to an old classic book. I couldn't speak for anybody else. I mean, it's certainly as good a place as any to start with a great book. Great, why not?
Question way. Yes, could you please stand up?
Hi, I'm from Canada. A couple of my questions you've answered already. Also, my compliments on the score. Very interesting music. I wanted to ask about, obviously your interest in this story was from the personal point of view of the character, as you just said. Do you also find parallels to the situation in the world today?
Well, sure. I mean, but yeah, I mean that. We approached it as a boxing match at first. That was the idea, that it could be so easy to get caught up in parallels and allegory and that kind of things. But I mean, we're not dumb. We know what's going on. But at the same time, we're just so desperate. It's so funny how we get out there and everything about oil or religion goes away. You just really can't wait till the next day to see Daniel slap Paul again, or for Paul to slap Daniel. It just becomes like that's the only thing that you're after, that we were after, was like this kind of that kind of behavior. I
think when you're working on any story, you have to begin with much more modest ambitions than to teach somebody something about the world they live in. It's both it's kind of modesty, I guess it's kind of arrogance too, because it's very selfish and very specific world that you're looking for. If as a result of what you do, people hear some echoes, then that's no bad thing. But you begin in a much more personal way, I think.
Yeah, my name is David Zakar from Planet Interview. First, I have to say I really liked the movie. It was strange and cool, but also with a good sense of dark humor, and especially at the end. I have one question for Daniel and Paul Dano. Can you say something about the way acting together? So you are an upcoming actor, and you play with Daniel Day-Lewis, and you had very emotional scenes, especially at the end. Can you say something about how it was for you to work together?
Yeah, I have to try and say something without embarrassing Daniel. There's really nobody better to go to bat with than Daniel, whether you're a young aspiring actor or a veteran of some kind, and there's not much to say about it except that it was really one of the great pleasures of my life to get to do so, and it was certainly intense at times, but I think there was a lot of fun to be had in the way we got to engage, and or at least for me, I know it was great fun. And the nice thing about working with Daniel is if you have to act, you're terrified, you probably don't have to do much acting. So it made my job pretty easy sometimes.
I'd already worked with Paul before on a film my wife made called The Ballad of Jack and Rose. So, and I'd seen Paul's other work as well, so I knew well enough what he was capable of. But you know, of course, in a situation where you where you have to play out a story that requires where the relationship demands that kind of collision, as we did, you know, one could be mistaken by thinking that you exist in a kind of somehow in a place of ill will. And of course the opposite has to be true. The paradox is that you have to create a working partnership with that person. The greater the animosity between those characters, the greater the strength of that partnership has to be. And finally it is, you know, because Paul and myself didn't spend much time together at all, if any, away from the set, away from the story. It requires a great degree of trust, and Paul is somebody that I implicitly trusted from the moment I first worked with him, and by trust I don't just mean by trust more than anything. You trust that person to be there, recognizable, living and breathing with you moment to moment, and that's the work that Paul does. I don't know how he does it. I don't care to know, but whatever he does, it's true, and that's all you need to know.
Question here, please.
Yeah. Hello, this is AJ Goldman from Anthem Magazine. This question is directed to Paul Thomas, but Paul and Daniel should feel free to jump on in. The film, I know, was released several months ago in America to sort of near-universal acclaim, and almost as unanimous was how controversial the ending has been. And I was wondering if in a room full of journalists you could respond to your critics, possibly, and maybe say a few words as to your decision to end the film that way, and whether, Daniel, whether you felt it, you know, also was, you know, the resolution that your character needed, and Paul Thomas, whether it was the resolution your film needed. Thank you.
Absolutely, it was the resolution, yes, absolutely. I mean, I was cheering Paul before I even met him for taking that story to that particular conclusion. It just seemed to have an unblinking honesty to it, which I completely applauded. And I have to say, we're very lucky because two fellas called the Coen brothers made a film apparently with an even more controversial end than ours. So our controversy has been eclipsed by theirs, and we hardly ever have to even answer that question anymore.
Yeah.
Your question, please.
It's Chris from Belgium. A question for Mr. Anderson. Could you comment on that conclusion, the fact that you, after a scope film, you ended inside in a bowling room, and on the fact that there is a twin? Paul Dano told me there is a twin, but a lot of people think it's one person.
The bowling alley, I first found out, we shot in a mansion in Beverly Hills that Edward Doheny built, called the Greystone Mansion, and I found out about the bowling alley because I'd seen a picture. He was going to be indicted in the Teapot Dome scandal in the 1920s, and he got a team of lawyers together, and he put all their desks in this bowling alley that he owned. So that seemed like a really good venue for the final showdown between the two of them. That's why we decided to set it there. It was just too good to pass up. It was just too good to be true. This bowling alley, we refurbished it. It was in very bad shape, and Jack Fisk did a wonderful job, went in and brought it back to its original condition. And the twins, yeah, some people have been confused, and I can see why, but hopefully it doesn't hurt the film. Yeah, I mean, there's some things that you do, you know. I mean, I guess there was a way to handle it that probably would have been, you know, like a close-up of HW saying they're twins, you know, or something like that. But we just decided not to do that.
Your question, please.
Hello, Kriko from Japan, Cat Magazine. The question is to Mr. Anderson. The music in the movie is very, very atypical and impressive, as somebody already mentioned. And actually, you worked with Johnny Greenwood for the first time. So how did the idea come up to you to work with him? Thank you.
Oh, well, I'd known Johnny a little bit for a few years and always had I'd never said it to him, but I always had a secret plan of asking him to do something like this. And as I was writing the film, some of the orchestral pieces that he'd done came to me. And so that kind of secret plan that I always had in the back of my mind seemed to just be like it would work, you know, like it was just it would be the right time to ask him if he had the time and if he was interested, and he was, and he'd never done anything. He'd never done a traditional film score. He did a BBC sort of experimental film, a terrific film called Body Song, but there was no story to follow. And I remember he was so excited when I showed him the film because that's sort of the first thing that appealed to him. He said, "There's a story. There's a story. I just have to write music to the story, right?" I said, "Yeah, that's all you have to do, really." He's like, "I can do that." He seemed incredibly nervous, but kind of confident if he followed that path that he could do it. And that's more or less what he did. Thank you for bringing up the music. Yeah, it's a terrific.
Question in the middle, in the back, please.
Hello, I'm here. I'm Jan Lumholt from Sweden. I have a question to Paul Thomas Anderson. You discussed the book a little before. I'd like you to elaborate a little more on the original novel and its author. A book from 1927. Did you stumble upon it in a book, like in a cheap bookstore or used books? Or
It was a bookstore in London. It wasn't very cheap. It was a good bookstore. It's still there. It's in Covent Garden. And it was hard to miss. It said oil in huge red letters with an exclamation mark. I mean, you couldn't miss it. It was just like, that looks good. And it had a beautiful painting of California, which is where I'm from. And the introduction to the book tells the story of how Upton Sinclair started the book, which was that his wife owned a plot of land down in Signal Hill, which is near Long Beach in California, and there's a collection of homeowners that got together because they'd found oil in this, what was meant to be these vacation homes overlooking the Long Beach Bay. The plans to make those vacation homes essentially got scrapped because they drilled for oil and they found it. So all these homeowners tried to get together to get a community lease. Upton Sinclair's wife was one of the homeowners. So they took a drive down to Long Beach and they met, as this community lease met with 4 or 5 independent oil prospectors, and each one of them came to the house and made their sales pitch. And he was, you know, obviously fascinated. Here was, you know, that he watched as this community had no chance of getting together. Everyone was arguing. It was just like you see in the film. Everyone kind of bickering over the size of their lots, whether it was a corner lot, whether they'd actually begun to build a house already, and whether that entitled them to more. And so no one could divide this community lease up. And it was his idea to then introduce himself to one of these oil prospectors. He followed him around. This one independent prospector he met invited him out to a ranch that he was going to trade for leasing Mrs. Upton Sinclair's land. So they eventually didn't do that. But over the course of a few weeks that he spent with this man, he put together the idea for the novel, and for the first 150 pages of the book, it's a very focused story. It's about this man and his son, and their introduction to this ranch and that family, and there's the hinting at this battle between this preacher and the oil man. But after about 150 pages, that stuff goes away, and he's a very political writer, and he seemed to get less interested in the story and more interested in the politics of the time. So he kind of kept navigating the characters in all these different directions so that he could just cover all this ground. He was a writing machine. That's what his wife said about him. He was a writing machine. He wrote over 100 books. So in the adaptation, we kept the stuff that was more focused, the stuff that was early on that could help us kind of get the film into a reasonable amount of time. And the stuff that was hinted at, like the battle between the independent oil man and the preacher, the stuff that was only hinted at seemed to be really exciting, and the stuff that, when I was writing it down, felt like I wanted more of it. So we just used that book and then kept going on the things that he maybe hinted at or didn't or wasn't interested in following through on, but that seemed right for the film.
As nice a title as "There Will Be Blood" is, how could you pass up such a cool title as "Oil" with an exclamation mark?
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah. I fucked up. I don't know.
What should you say? No blood for oil?
Yeah.
Your question, please.
Hi, I'm Jürgen Faut with About.com, and I'm also the guy who set up IDrinkYourMilkshake.com. So naturally, I'm curious what you make of the way that phrase has started to, the line has started to take off in the culture.
That's great.
You know, here in political.
You did that?
I did that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well done.
What do you make of that? Does it detract from the movie? Do you think it?
No.
Not at all. No. No, it's a huge compliment. We couldn't be happier about it.
Yeah. I must have known something was going on, actually, because after we shot that scene in the bowling alley, I could hear the crew would always say to each other, "Drainage." They were doing their Plainview impressions, so I should have known then that something good was going to happen. But I love it. It's great. Mad.
Yes. Yes. Wait for the microphone. Please stand up.
I have a question for the director and one for Danny. For the director, this is the first time I see a film about oil, that we can see the people, the greedy, that are destroying a bit of Africa, like Darfur, Delta Niger. Because we always think about the multinational. How did you manage to bring this figure so clean and neat? And the other question is, outside the Berlinale, 2 years ago, there was here a really great guy, and 2 weeks ago, he left us. And you dedicated your prize to him. That's later. Did you know him? Can you talk about him?
I didn't know Heath, no, and I'm reluctant to talk about him now, as much as I was glad to have a chance to say something in that moment. I now feel that, there's plenty more I could say, but we're not just fueling a fire that's already out of control. His family, for instance, at this moment, are trying to suffer the unimaginable grief in the full scrutiny of a fucking circus. And anything that I say is going to probably just contribute even more to that, because it keeps the story running and running and running and running. There will come a time eventually when people just remember that he was a beautiful man who did some wonderful work, and we would have seen great things from him. But right now, I can't say that I'm too enthusiastic about just adding more fodder to what's already just a horrendously, obscenely overblown machine that's gathered around his death. It's horrible.
Your question, please.
Stefan Benz again. Question to Paul Thomas Anderson. You pointed out how much of Upton Sinclair's novel is in the film. Could you explain how much of this oil tycoon Doherty is in it, and if this film is in this way also a biography like it is Citizen Kane and Aviator of Hearst and Hughes?
Yeah, Doheny is maybe who I think Doheny is maybe who you're referring to. Upton, there were a handful of men like Doheny. Harry Sinclair was another one. Obviously, J. Paul Getty, and a number of other men who had similar stories. And the story was, they were on the tail end of the Wild West. They started mainly as gold and silver prospectors, and when oil became the thing to look for, they went looking for it and made enormous fortunes. Now, more or less, if you've heard one of their stories, you've heard them all, because they didn't end up happy. They ended up in jail, or they ended up close to jail, or there was a murder or a suicide or a scandal, whatever it was. All these stories ended in a similar way for a lot of these men, but at the same time they kept their empires running and rolling. And so Doheny was just one of the stories that we took from and mixed in with just imagination. Yeah.
There's a question in the back.
Peter Paul Hu, German Television. A question to Mr. Anderson and Mr. Day-Lewis. I believe the title is a biblical reference to the Old Testament, and I was wondering in what sense the character of Daniel Plainview is a biblical character from the Old Testament.
I didn't write the title as a reference. I mean, I don't. I mean, there may be a phrase in the Bible, "There will be blood," but that would be news to me. Well, he's named Daniel. That's a start as a New Testament character, Old Testament character. I didn't really think. I didn't really think along those lines. A little more Moby Dick than Bible, probably.
Question way in the back, beneath the camera.
Yes. Can you hear me again? It's Yanis from Greece. A more general question to anyone on the panel that can answer. Would you say that Daniel Plainview is a character that could be in any of us?
I think so. Yeah. Some more than others, probably, but I think so. Yeah. There's a little bit of Plainview in everybody. That's our marketing. They're going to put that on the They're going to put that on the poster and see.
As a Plainview.
I mean, I don't know. I have people that come up and they say, I love him. And then a girl came up to me the other day and she said, I want to fuck Daniel Plainview. I didn't know what to say to that one. And I was just kind of like, oh my God. And then somebody else that said, I really liked him, and then I didn't like him. Or somebody else that said, I really felt sorry for him at the end. So I've heard everything, but it's great that way. It's amazing, actually, that people feel, so many different things. It's great. It's great. They really feel, and it's nicest of all when they say, God, he let me down. He really let me down. That they were rooting for him. They actually thought that it might go the other way. That's sort of nicest when people say that. They feel like they let him down. It's great.
Question here, please. Could you please stand up?
Lacerda, CBN News Brazil. I have two questions on Mr. Lewis. The first one is, being so many times nominated for the Oscar, how do you go to such a ceremony? How does it feel? And the second one is, if you're going to engage yourself on this year's presidential elections. Thank you.
Presidential elections for which country are you referring to? No, I'm not an American citizen, so all I can do is stand by and applaud my wife for voting the right way. You have to ask her that. It's not my place to answer for her. I'll be catching the bus myself. And no, I didn't really understand the question. I'm sorry, I didn't really understand it. What is it you'd like me to tell you?
Has been so many times nominated.
Yes,
right? When you go there to the Oscar, you go like relax and let's wait and see what happens, or you're really nervous on that?
Really relaxed, incredibly nervous. Yeah, absolutely.
No, it's horrible.
Really nervous, but actually pretending to be relaxed. Or in some cases, incredibly relaxed and pretending to be nervous. But in my case, I'm just going to turn up and see what happens. And I will really, really try and enjoy it.
The question on the left, please.
Yes, Raymond Scholler, Genève. I wanted to ask Mr. Daniel Day-Lewis. I had the impression that you were adopting the speech patterns of John Huston, that you were really sort of channeling him. Am I wrong there?
Well, if you are wrong, you might not be entirely wrong, but just slightly wrong. And in as far as he was, I listened to some recordings of Mr. Huston's voice, but I also listened to quite a number of other recordings as well. And what I can't account for is then what happened, because it wasn't my intention to try and talk like John Huston, although there was something tremendously appealing to me about the vigor of his voice, a certain relish that he had with the language, and a feeling that he came from a different time. Happily for me, there are no recordings that exist from the period in which our story is set, so no one can say to me categorically, no one talked like that. I dare say Mr. Huston certainly played some part in it anyway.
Question here in front, please. Could you please stand up? Yeah.
One question to Mr. Daniel Day-Lewis. I'm Or Heller from the Israeli television. As an Oscar nominee, I would like to know if you already saw the Israeli nominee, the movie before, and what you thought about it. And the second question: have you already picked your next project? What, if you can tell us what it will be? Thank you.
I haven't seen that film, and the reason I haven't seen it is because we get sent screeners of films around this time of year, and I do, as far as I possibly can, try and see all the films that may be eligible in any category, and that's not a film that I received, nor has it been screened. Where I live in a fairly remote part of the world, and we don't have a local cinema, and as far as I know, it hasn't been screened anywhere there yet, but it is a film that I will certainly see at some point, yes, and I look forward to it.
Last question for today, please.
Yes, hi, Niels from Norway. I got a question for Daniel Day-Lewis. You are among the modern actors of this day and age who practice method acting. And in Gangs of New York, you did it at impressive measures. Did you do any type of method acting in this movie? Or
I'm so glad that we're finishing with a question that I can't answer. Thank you for that.
So we've been very happy to have you here. There will be blood on screen on the Berlin Film Festival. Thanks, Daniel Day-Lewis. Thanks, Paul Thomas Anderson. Thanks, Paul Dano.